Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Hangout. Today we've got Jeeva, who works with Helix Collective. Um, it's my first time meeting you, and I'm sure many others. So let's kick it from the top. Maybe a little bit about who you are, how you got here, and how you came across an interest in Soulbounds.
Sure. Uh, who am I? I guess at the heart, I'm just a dev. That's the truth of it. So on the Discord channels, when people say devs do something, they're normally talking about me, and and that's kind of what kicked off my career. So I started as a strat at Macquarie Bank way back in the day. Did that for a few years on the energy desk in London. Left, and then I was trying to work out what I wanted to do in life, and I started Helix. And the point of Helix was essentially at the core just to work on cool shit with people I wanted to work on. And it was me and my business partner at the start. We had pretty deep networks. We didn't want to join any particular startup, but we were happy to jump on and solve some problems, do something interesting, and then move on to the next. And when you're working in this early stage space, you end up having to be a little bit flexible on how much dollars you take versus equity or otherwise. And that is the genesis of Helix. We work on cool shit with people we want to work on it with. We try to collect some equity along the way. We don't take on a lot of bets, maybe, for about a year. And we generally go through different, I don't know, seasons where we have a certain thesis. So when Helix first kicked off, the thesis was broadly consumer, as in let's build consumer apps, and then it sort of like shifted over the years to SaaS, big enterprise sort of software, uh, fintech, and then more recently, I guess blockchain and clean tech is where Helix is at.
Okay, and
That's
so does
yeah.
someone come to you with like an idea? Are they like early stage? They don't have anyone that can help build,
Yeah,
design,
we
start?
pretty much as in our what are we better than everyone else at, or we think we are better than most people at, is product and engineering, right? That's where we sort of sit. So that's the core of it. So people come with us to an idea, and then we wrangle the bits. Sometimes we have to wrangle funding. Sometimes we, jump in the product engineering team. We build that up. We're not marketers, for example. So if the bet is mostly a marketing play, then that's not something we'd take on because we don't have any extra leverage to be there. But that's broadly where Helix sits in the mix. It doesn't have to be external stuff. I'm going to say out of the approximately 4 bets we take a year, normally 3 are external and one something that we've cooked up ourselves. That's just how it seems to have rolled out over the last few years.
Very,
But yeah,
very cool. And I guess the structures sounds like it's sort of different. So rather than being engaged maybe on like a retainer or a project, you look for equity. Is that the main like difference on that
yeah,
side?
we still have because the team's grown now. It's not just me and my business partner from way back. So we do have payroll to meet and cash obligations. So it ends up being, I describe it as like we need enough cash trickling in day by day to meet expenses.
Yeah.
And then we're happy to take our, I don't know, like margin or our risk premium in in something that is aligning the outcomes at the tail end, right?
Yep.
That could be equity, could be tokens that vest over time, which is, I guess, equity ask. It could be metrics of the business, like if daily active users increases, then we're going to be paid a little bit extra for the work we've done to bring you there.
Yep.
Where it could just be on next funding round, you pay us a good chunk of money. Like we're reasonably flexible on how we want to structure this, but it does sort of align everything up when um I'm a big believer in like aligning incentives. So I want to align the incentives on the time horizon. So if we're rewarded on the same time horizon on the founders or in a similar time horizon, not never going to be the same. I think that does wonders for aligning everyone's incentives to push forward and do the right thing for the business.
Yep. Definitely. I can see the logic in that. And so I guess you've dabbled into, dabbled might be not fair. You've gone into the crypto space to continue that sort of model, and you've come across Soulbounds. Where do they sort of sit for you? How are you thinking about that? And maybe like, what's your take on what a Soulbound kind of is, at least for now?
Yeah. Dabble, yeah. I was going to say I probably switched from dabble, which was previous cycles, to this cycle, diving in head first and seeing if I got eaten alive or actually survived this craziness. And thankfully it was the latter. And I still got all my limbs, although I've been nibbled at by the sharks. And what really clicked for me was DeFi. That was the click. And it might be a combination of my finance background, maybe just my like general anarchist tendencies, but that's what sort of, for me, was like, I need to be working here. I need to jump in. What surprised me as I was diving in and working in crypto was how the communities work and how that all like links together. The investors, the team, the first early customers, they're kind of all this like same big one melting pot, and everyone's sort of hanging out together and chatting and hacking on stuff, yeah, I thought that was very cool. And that obviously led me to, not obviously, but as we're sort of working on things and trying to push stuff up here, governance or organizational structures started really coming to the forefront. Is how do you wrangle this mob of decentralized humans to coordinate to do something without top down control, which is really hard in crypto to have top down control. As in, you can have charismatic leaders, but you can't. It's and people do try to do this, but like, I subscribe to maybe the more pure form of, you want to align the right incentives and get people working together, and stuff like I think like Snapshot or otherwise, they were good. I think first cuts, or they were good sort of starting points on what you could do here and how you could push it forward. But I definitely felt that they weren't good enough, as in they didn't capture the nuance of all the stakeholders involved. They kind of like overly financialized certain actors, as in you could just buy your way in, and you needed something else, as in you needed to also respect and take into account the stakeholders who may not have a large financial stake, but have poured their heart and soul in, right? Like they have a large emotional stake, and how do you capture that? How do you track that? How do you sort of allow that to be managed or otherwise? And that, of course, leads to soulbound tokens or this idea in general. So I definitely came from the, I don't know, decentralized organization side as to why I think it's interesting tech. There was another part to your question, which I'm not remembering now, but that's how I stumbled upon soulbound tokens.
I feel like that was all I
Okay, all right,
meant to ask anyway.
easy.
That's really interesting. Definitely a common theme that I'm seeing talking to different people. It's many different ways as to how they arrived here, but then this kind of aligning view that there can be a lot of value gained by soulbounds, given that you can't transfer them, at least as like a base assumption. It's a bit of nuance to unpack when you actually look at it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I like, and I also really like this idea that you can start capturing and proving things about yourself with that somewhat like building blockable and plugging into other things along the way, which I don't we haven't scratched the surface enough of, but it's really cool. So
yeah, like your contributions or the soulbounds that you earn, putting aside whether or not you want to reveal them, but there's optionality there by the sound of like what
yeah,
some people are looking at. So if you want to retain privacy, I guess you can, or at least it seems reasonable that you'll be able to. But I guess also the transferability of your contribution, so like using it as a identifier for something else, I think is interesting. It's kind of like the interoperability of a NFT for gaming, how everyone said like you get the sword over here and that means you can go and build on this thing and you've got a car in that ecosystem. And it's like, you know, that was a lot of the hype originally with NFTs. But I guess I see a lot more relevancy for Soulbounds where you can go and prove that you've been a good actor in a different community. Um,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff's pretty interesting. Um, the other common theme, like this ties very well into identity. If I was to summarize what I've talked to different people about so far, it's been, yeah, ability to improve governance, ability to build digital identity, whether or not it's attached to a real world. And beyond that, it kind of starts to get like very much just a hybrid combination of those two things. Um, I don't want to put you on the spot too much because I don't know if I have an answer myself. Can you think of other use cases that maybe people are missing in Soulbounds?
I can't think of any, but like yes,
Yeah, I
there's
know,
there's
right?
other use cases that people are missing, and we're all missing, and we haven't thought about it yet. I um I kind of think of it as like it is pre-product market fit,
For
as
sure.
in it's we're talking about the tech still. We haven't yet started talking about like we know that digital identity is going to be good. We know it's going to be important. We know it's going to be useful. Um, how important is it that it's locked to a single wallet or otherwise? It's like for me, those are sort of somewhat irrelevant bits of information. As in, it's um, like we'll get better at sleuthing and working out whether this was something that was like sold as opposed to earned, and what you did with your address and how that how that translates, and um like I think all of this stuff is going to happen, and it's going to be fine in the long run, right? Like as in it's I don't think that's the technically can you transfer it or not is the question that I don't know everyone seems to be sort of jumping on, but for me that's not as important as once you have a digital identity that is somewhat reliable and useful, like what cool things are we going to build on top of that, and how that is going to be leveraged in an interesting way. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's feels relatively acceptable to say, I'm sure we'll solve that. Do you know what I
I'm
mean?
sure we'll solve
Or
that. Yeah,
there'll be some use cases where it's really relevant, some where it's not, different sort of, yeah, levels of risk or whatnot, and harder problems that'll need a lot more identifiers to really leverage the trust. Um, but I kind of put that in the doesn't seem like there's going to be a technical blocker to it. It's probably just a framework or approach that needs to be fleshed out a
yeah,
bit. Um,
yeah. Honestly, it's you know, if someone was desperate enough to sell their identity, they'll just sell their private key, right? Like as in, it's like the whether it can be transferred or not is just an inconvenience in my view. So
yeah,
it's I'm not. I guess like I don't think I definitely think of Soulbound is like the key feature is not it can't be transferred. The key feature is that it captures things about you that then you can use in other parts of your digital life, and that's really important. Like as in, it's whether
gotcha.
you can buy well, like, and the social layer is that you're not meant to sell it. Like I'm not meant to sell my driver's license, but I don't know if I was desperate and I had to feed my family and someone wanted to buy it and to commit identity theft, I'd probably bend my morals so that my family's not starving on the street. It's like, and I'm sure people do it all the time, right? So it's
Yeah. And I mean,
yeah,
if the cost to acquire that is high enough, it's hard to scale to then use as like to buy 10,000 of those highly trusted accounts that have taken 3 years each to build up or whatever it is. Like the high barrier of cost might be enough to stop that kind
I'm
of stuff.
confident.
Yeah.
I'm confident that if the thing you do is valuable enough and the thing that you earn and accrue here is valuable enough,
Yeah.
most people won't sell it. It's
Yeah.
in the same reason most people don't go around selling their driver's license. It's even if they were offered on the dark web to do so, it's not worth it. It's not
No.
worth it for everything else you lose as a result. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. Um, that's cool. Are you working on anything at the moment to do with governance and soulbounds or that you can share
No,
or
no, I'm not working on anything at the moment to do with governance or soul bounds. I might. I'm I'm spending some time over the next quarter to actually work out what my next big bet is in this space and what I'm pushing on. And I I honestly don't know where it's gonna roll out. I'm always going to be interested in this stuff because human coordination has always been a area of fascination for me ever since I read. There's this awesome book called Maverick, which I read way back in the day, and it's essentially this guy. I think he's Brazilian. This Brazilian guy who has who has a set of factories, but instead of this is like way back in the day. Instead of the factories being run in a very top-down fashion, they'll basically run as DAOs. Um, he didn't use those words, but they'll basically run as DAOs. And he wrote a book about it, but he didn't really write a book. It wasn't like the manual of how to do it. It was more the feeling of what working and in these environments looks like as both a leader and as like a participant.
Hmm.
And after I read it, I was hooked. I was like, this is clearly how the world should work. This is what human actualization looks like. And I can't imagine I'd ever work or grow an organization that didn't have these principles. So I suspect I'll be leveraging various things about soulbound tokens and just the state of the art and what people are building as building blocks as I sort of push forward whatever I do. But I'm not pushing anything specific in the governance space. Not at the moment anyway. That could change.
Yeah, yeah.
I do. I'm not going to take any credit for it other than like I do sort of philosophize with Rob a lot about this stuff as well.
Mr.
So
Morris,
Mr. Morris, so
I had a
I could
good
get
chat with
sucked
him.
into his shenanigans. Otherwise, nothing specific.
That's good. I had a good chat with Rob. That'll be up alongside this at some point soon. Um, it's interesting, like the Maverick. I looked it up. It's 1995 book, but obviously the
Yeah.
stuff took place before then. And I guess it's like it's easy to forget the whole benefit of a DAO is really that you're removing like maybe trust, and so you've got the like transparent structure and framework, and then you can trust in that being sort of how it should play out. But you actually don't need like if you've got someone in the top of a hierarchy like CEO of a company, they can still choose to run it in that same format, and the trust is just on them. But you can have trustworthy people do that. And so I'm sure there's like, yeah, I've got it open. I'll bookmark that and have a peek. But it's like a lot of these really cool things you can do with DAOs, I think they've already been done before just by people that were good people, trustworthy, like they had a
The
different way of looking at it. It's cool.
hundred
That's
percent.
unlock there.
Um, there's another great book here called Reinventing Organizations. I personally found it a bit dry, but like it does go into more like detail on like actual implementations of people who've created decentralized organizations, for lack of a better way of describing it. For me, the key feature of a DAO is that it 100% has to be decentralized, and you can do it from a top-down CEO perspective, but there's certain rules that are baked in at the incentive layer, such that it's I'm like you can't not do it, right? As in, the
Yeah.
CEO can't rug it, like as in that's the like as in there's incentives baked in the game theory encoded in smart contracts. That means that you don't need to trust that the CEO will always be a good actor. Like as in,
Yeah.
it does not matter. They can be hit by a bus. They can change their mind and say it's not a good idea. But the rules of the game are set. and those who want to play it can always play it. Like for me, the autonomous part is what makes this next generation, or what we can do with DAOs, with stuff on chain, or decentralized organizations have existed for ages, but autonomous decentralized organizations, that's the on-chain innovation that
Yep.
is that's and maybe this is to go back to your original question, are there things that people aren't doing with soulbound tokens? I don't think people are doing enough or thinking enough about this autonomous side. Like some people are, Rob being one of them, but in general, that's a side that's been um, people sort of like look at the organization as like, oh yeah, it's decentralized and we can use snapshot, and okay, that's cool, but like that is a lever where that's an untapped vein. There is a lot to explore there, and a lot to build, and a lot to experiment with. Um, and kicked off by Bitcoin, but there's so much more there.
Would you agree that my take on what you mean by autonomous being really key is that you're no longer limited necessarily by like the scale of one person making decisions?
You're no longer no. Hmm.
Or like their ability to hire a team for that specific purpose and allocate resources, like in a
I
DAO.
think I, I think that's for me. That's the decentralized portion of it. The autonomous portion is that it is no longer possible for one person to rug it.
Okay.
The game is encoded for all time. Like okay, there's a process to change the rules of the game, but broadly speaking, the game is encoded.
Yeah. Okay. Assuming that it was structured with good governance, good issuance, and like thoughtfully built. I guess there's plenty of
Yeah,
DAOs out there right now. You look at it and you're like, that's not. I guess they're not doing the autonomous part well, or there's risk that they haven't structured it well. But
and possibly not the decentralized part well as well, right? As in, like, I think there's a lot out there that are like, you know, somewhat failing at both. But this is the promise for me anyway. This is what makes me super excited about working on crypto stuff and working on chain, which is this. And I'm not even sure what it is about my particular nature. Maybe I just loathe having to be like the boss of something. That's just too much mental load and responsibility. I prefer to just be an actor and leader in a more autonomous system. And if the community decides to soft fork or hard fork and change and move to another one, like so be it. Like that's a good outcome.
yeah, that seems like a healthy mechanism to protect against like something that's not going where the community wants. I would say if I could have a crack at
Yeah,
why you don't want to be in that like boss role versus a part of a DAO or the future of where DAOs go. To me, I the way that I've sort of where I've landed on that is because there's areas that you have the ability to add value to, and they don't always align with the requirements of that role. Where like if it was in a DAO sort of structure and you can go and go like, this is interesting. Oh, I can add value here. Have you thought about this? Or like connect with these, blah, blah, blah. Like that's where I think people like you probably have like a lot of leverage. And when you are running a business, you end up being caught with like all of the bits that might not be maybe where your heart is or where your interest is, or maybe even experience. Whereas you'll have other people that are like insane number like crunching wizards and they thrive in that. And so it's like they can play the CEO role of that function. Do you know what I mean? It's like a DAO kind of seems like it opens up a lot more of that, the ability to align people better into like where they want to fit and
yeah,
where they like.
yeah. I like definitely, and it makes the distinction between for lack of a better term, like worker bee and founder and leader far more continuous, which
Mm,
I like.
yeah,
As in, it's you can you can go and add like in a well structured system, you can go and add value well after the founding date,
yeah,
and still get founder s sort of like fair for that point in time founder esque risk return in terms of how you're remunerated and how you're rewarded for it, which I think is like that is super interesting. That changes how people work, that changes how they collaborate. It and this is going, well past Soulbound Tokens, but it changes this multivariable landscape that we're in at the moment that makes it possible. And we haven't yet, I think, achieved it fully, but makes it possible that positive sum games and people collaborating together is net better economically for everyone involved. So that's what is more likely to happen, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that resonates well with me. One question that I've asked, I think maybe two or three others. I'm trying to like spread the topics around into the different verticals, I guess. But there's like in that dynamic where someone is able to join late, perhaps, and still have the incentive structure be there. Because if you look at DAOs right now, there's plenty of DAOs right now, and you talk to people that are interested in DAOs, they all want to start their own so that they can have the highest exposure, like upside, right? And they might not agree exactly with how another DAO's done, so they go fork, make a change. This is going to be a better DAO for these reasons, and they got this upside. But I kind of see a theme, and it's not too different to even how protocols like layer ones or projects sort of launch, where they go like, what's the value for me to go and submit a proposal to improve, Uniswap, when I can go and fork Uniswap, implement the changes that I've come up with that'll have a multiple of benefit, rebrand it, relaunch it, new token, full upside. Because in my mind, like if you really solve for the DAO, like to have a strong DAO, people would come in late and they wouldn't feel the need to go and start it from scratch. And the only way I feel like you can achieve that is if there's good incentive for them to contribute throughout the life cycle, like 10 years down the line. I don't personally have an answer to that, but I feel like that's one of the key problems to like try and address.
Look, I've got a thesis on this. I don't know if it's an answer. The answer is like yes.
Mm,
Is like that's exactly what I hope will happen. I So what have we learned over like tech innovation over the last, I don't know, decade or thereabouts? Is we've become really good at engineering for network effects. Like we have nailed that, and we have nailed that well. But we live in, this is like second order chaotic systems of humans, right? So like now that we know that we're good at engineering network effects, we're less likely to just fall into that trap, right? As in we're less likely to just let someone do something that engineers network effects and give all that value away unless we're getting an outsized value in return. And this is where stuff like blockchain and value sharing to early people sort of like really shines. So the next, so the first wave of tech was like, we now know how to do network effects, and a small minority captured all the value, right? As in like the value capture or the rent collection was unfair. My thesis is that the next wave is we know how to do network effects. We're just going to be better at doing it, but the value capture is going to just have to be a bit more fairer. Otherwise, the ones that aren't fair, they're not going to win. And even in the first wave, the ones that won were the ones that had basically started out the gates with what would be described as fair rent collection, and and went for it. And the ones that are like maintaining their position are also more or less in the same boat, right? As in like that's kind of like we kind of know that that's what's going to win, or that's the playbook of what's going to win. And whether people want to contribute to the same DAO or otherwise is like, yep, like if a DAO does a great job of aligning the incentives so that people can contribute, that's fantastic. But we've also got this extra lever on chain where even after the fact, it's possible for two DAOs to quite easily merge, or at the very least align incentives at the very, very highest possible level. Like as in it's swap a chunk of your treasury for a chunk of my treasury. Okay, cool. Like we may not have started aligned, or it might have been a little too hard for me to go through the political process in Uniswap to, make my change, get in and do the thing that I want to do or otherwise. So it might actually be healthy for people to fork and do their thing and let the market decide if that's worth it or not. If there's a willingness at some other point in time to essentially DAO swap and merge, I suspect that there will be, because that's what is going to provide network effects. And we know that network effects wins, and it's a power law distribution almost in a way here. So is this is my thesis anyway, that we're going to see this play out. And and there'll always be people who will like fork Uniswap because they think that there's more value to be captured. But unless you can win in the network effects game, there's not more value to be captured. Like that's the bottom line. As in, when you're building stuff at this sort of scale, it's not worth it to be the little small player who's doing a thing. It's like eventually you'll be eaten some way or the other as the network effect finally reaches your corner of the world. And it's the better long-term play, which I think is good, is that there's just more value sharing, and therefore the DAOs that do the protocols or the setups or the games that do the best value sharing, that have come out of the gates with fair rent collection, they will attract people, they'll attract talent, and maybe the best way to get something done is to fork and then merge back in. Like that could be.
Yeah,
I'm completely open to that, right? As in, it's and I've contributed to a bunch of open source software over the years, and sometimes it's not worth arguing in PRs and on GitHub that your idea is good. You're better off just fucking implementing it, like using it, showing that you're using it, and then at that point, the proof is in the pudding almost, right? As in, it's okay. The maintainer still doesn't want to merge it in, fine, but it's there, it's out there in the world. Other people can use it. People can make a choice accordingly. Generally speaking, once you get that kind of proof, even if begrudgingly, your thing gets merged in, as in, or it becomes a legitimate fork. This is like, no, this is not our vision. It's fine. This is a different way of going about it, and it blossoms in its own right. It's not a very concrete answer, but this is me being very airy-fairy on I think all of these are fine in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's definitely a complex. It's a hard problem, and so I don't expect anyone individual to have the answer. It's more like I guess it's a perfect format for talking about it, because we'll put it in the community chat, and someone else may have a different take, and over time someone will have a crack. And I do agree that makes sense. If people are forking off to trial stuff, maybe that's more high risk, right? The DAO might not want to expose, no different to how Bitcoin upgrades work or anything like that. And then over time, the DAO can, you'll have all the spin-off sort of.
And I'd go as far as saying it's like this is what happens in normal innovation as well. Like there's two ways you can get your product innovated as part of the Google setup, right? Like you can go get a job at Google and play the political game and pitch for this and do that and work on your thing. And some people are beautifully suited to that, right? Their constitution is designed for that. I know that that's not my constitution. I will just rage quit in a day, right? I'm way more happy to just take on all the risk myself, just build it, maybe do a bit of fundraising, and then go try to sell it to Google later. And okay, sure, they'll pay a premium at that point, but they didn't have to take any of the risk early.
No, that's right.
They didn't have to pay my salary. And also, generally speaking, organizations are designed in a certain way, right? They have a certain bureaucracy, a certain cadence, a certain political process that's required for this disparate group of humans to function. Even with the smart contract layer laying out the incentives, you still have the social layer that controls things. So sometimes the fastest way to innovate is to fork off and do it separately. What I hope is that there's a social layer that generally accepts that, I guess the network effects are going to win, which means that the good ideas do get folded back in or merged at the economic incentive layer. That's what I hope. But we'll see what happens. I guess we have this video now, so in 10 years time, I can go back and see how wrong or right I was.
Oh, I think it'll rhyme with it, definitely. And I think once you have a DAO that does take some prominent position, there'll be a lot of like clout that comes from bringing, or like basically getting acquired by the DAO, right? You know, if you
Yeah.
get acquired by Google, that's like a big stamp of like authority. Probably something similar. Maybe you'll have the option of selling to two different DAOs, but you know that this one you'll get some soulbound recognition for that, and that's might be worth a lot to someone.
Well,
Um,
100%, right? As in, I think this is where Soulbound sort of becomes important, because it's not just about the organization, but the humans involved getting recognized for the great work that they've done,
yeah,
and you're going off trying to get other work, or in general add other value elsewhere. And it's just undeniable that rocking up and being able to say that I've got all this clout, like, it's as much as I'd love to imagine that everything's like, perfectly based on merit, is like, I know me rocking up and in a pitch being like, I've got a decade of experience going from 0 to 1, I should do this shit, like, that sways people.
yeah,
Like, whether it should or not is a different question, but it does, right? That's the game, and that's how humans are wired, and you'd be silly not to play it.
definitely. And I think also like you could just layer on so many perks beyond that. There might be some recognition, but maybe like someone else over the way, they like what you did because it helped their project. And so when you go and interact with that ecosystem, you've got something to show for it there. Like
Yeah.
if it's like an identifier, if it's a game, you get a cool wizard hat or something that no one else has, stuff like that. Could be cool. Easy to get carried away with it though. Um, I reckon one of the coolest jobs in a DAO would be for someone that has a role where they go and scout for talent that's existing in that DAO. Because you'll have a lot of people that are very noisy about what work they're up to. But I think like there'd be some pretty cool like roles where they've got the ability to go and be like, oh, this contribution over here from, you know, person ABC123, like that was valuable. I think that'd be cool. I feel like it would need that kind
Oh,
of,
no, definitely. Like, I think you definitely need that, right? And you need, because you're right. There's going to be a lot of people who are noisy, but there's going to be a few people who are just like chugging away, getting their job done.
yeah.
And you want to make sure that they're like value to everyone, to make sure that they're recognized and rewarded for it.
Mm,
A lot of what Rob's doing, and I don't want to, I'm going to paraphrase this badly, but creating the primitives for smaller communities or smaller groups of people to organize to achieve sort of the higher ends of the DAO, like, I think is going to be pretty important as well.
yeah.
Um, it's uh, it's it's kind of how Eric Voorhees, what's the DAO called? What's the project? The
Shapeshift.
um, Shapeshift. Yeah. Then they try to, if you look at the proposals for the work that's put out, it tries not to make this, move this button 5 pixels to the left. It tries to be a little bit more projecty based
Right.
and OKR based, for lack of a better way of describing it, which naturally aligns to, like, it's not something that one person can take on. Is a team needs to form around it, and then that team forms, and then that team is call it what you want. It could be a sub DAO. It could be just someone just commanding and conquering, and like being head honcho and delegating a bunch of things. At that level, it doesn't matter, but it's cool that is like, as in, what am I trying to say? I think Soulbound tokens are going to play a role in this, in the, I don't know, DAOs all the way down, or lots of little micro communities having to organize up to achieve larger aims.
Yep.
Space.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think we'll probably see them applied far beyond like this is a DAO, it has one type of soulbound. There'll be, yeah, huge range. Um,
Because
like if Helix takes on a project, because you can have a centralized actor doing
yeah,
contribution, right? Like you might incentivize the people you work with something. So like they get, little sword and shield kind of, they're part of like the
and
squadron. Yeah.
what a lot of what Helix did during DeFi summer was essentially like hang around in a bunch of DAOs, and then when there was an interesting sort of thing to work on, instead of it just being, we'd take this one bit of work, we'd take a big chunk and we'd wrap a team around it, and it worked pretty well, because the DAO could operate at a higher level. just delegated this whole sort of sub thing out, and there was a bunch of people working on it. They were embedded in the DAO. Yeah, it's hard to say. It would have been a lot of work to break down exactly who did what in that team and have a soulbound that was like matching that, as opposed to the more broader, you were pretty impactful on this team of three. As in, it's
Yeah.
didn't matter exactly what you did per se. You could get automation eventually that works it out, but that's somewhat like that's interesting, but it might be at the wrong level. What's more important is that like you were involved in this project. Like you're involved in this project, and what was your role? Were you leading the charge? Were you a contributor? Like where'd you sit? And I think that's an important marker to have.
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe there's just a way of going like, this was the contribution from this team, allocate between yourselves, kind of thing. So
Yeah,
people can be fair with each other since they're more intimate on that level with each other.
exactly right. Yeah,
Well, it's certainly an exciting sort of arc, I think, that we're on. And I'm really keen to see where the soulbound parts come into it. I think there'll be a hybrid of all sorts of different bits. And thank you. I guess we'll probably wrap it there. But super exciting. It was actually really, really great bouncing around with you. I hope
likewise.
other people get a kick out of it and drop in and add your 2 cents as well. And yeah, cool stuff. We'll have to
Awesome.
chat some more.
And thanks for letting me do it sitting in my car.
Yeah, that's all right. No stress at all. We're always on the run.
Alrighty.
Thanks
All
heaps.
right.
Take care.
Thanks, King. See ya.